Good evening. It's 5 o'clock on Monday, June 6th, 2022. The Goldsboro City Council work session. It's now called to order. Madam Clerk, if you would call the roll.
Mayor Ham.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Polak.
Yes.
Councilwoman Jones.
Present.
Councilman Broadway.
Here.
Councilwoman Matthews.
Present.
Councilman Gaylor.
Present.
Councilman Aycock.
Here.
Okay, we're all here. Next item on the agenda is adoption of the agenda. You had an opportunity to look at it. Is there a motion to, first of all, is there any changes or additions to the agenda that you would like to make?
I'd like to see item Y move to items requiring individual action.
Item Y. Item Y is the zoning Z622.
Yes.
Okay, move that to individual, item requiring additional individual action.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other changes, proposed changes? If not, may I have a motion to adopt the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been made and second to adopt the agenda, the amended agenda. All in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay, we'll start off with the old business, and the city manager is going to give us some updates on the budget. And as a reminder, we'll be meeting again tomorrow night to talk about it in detail. So go ahead, Mr. Salmon.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mayor and council members. In order to help us tomorrow night, I wanted to review a few things this evening so the council members think about it. At the last council meeting for the FY23 budget, I believe we had council consensus on these items. In addition to the manager's recommended budget salary increases of 3% COLA, 1% merit, and a $300 bonus, it was determined that the GPD and GFD pay requests would be funded through the $500,000 road paving vice tax increases. And we would consider a 2% bonus for all employees with department offsets, which I went through over the last week with department heads. So I'll provide some information on that. We would not fund the council chamber DIAS for $8,000 or citizen survey for $7,000. Instead, use the existing or modified DIAS and a free survey. We would not fund the street sweeper. This would reduce our vehicle loan from $2.4 million to $2.1 million. This was my recommendation. And we would swap the budget garbage truck rear end loader for a front end loader. That's because of the recent fire to a front end loader. The rear end loader would cost about $200,000. The front end loader costs about $350,000. We should get some insurance back that will generally allow that to occur. Any council members have anything else they would like to add to that? You can let me know tonight, tomorrow, or right now, but that's kind of where we're at, I believe. Okay, so when it comes to additional pay options, we really need to think about how much and for how long. That is, cost of living and a merit increase that we pay now will be paid again in the future years, whereas a bonus is a one-time pay increase for this year. What you see below that is some benchmarks I pulled. North Carolina League of Municipalities for FY23 conducted a survey, and cities our size are averaging cost of living about 3.5%, and merit between 2 to 4%. Social Security last year was a 5.9% cost of living increase and is estimated to be 8.6% in 2023. And the consumer price index, or inflation, is grown by 8.3% over the last year. So option one for pay is, of course, the manager's recommended budget, which includes a 13% health insurance and 14% retirement increase for almost $2 million. Option two, council requested a 3% cost of living increase, 1% merit, and 2% bonus on top of that. So if you subtract the bonus that exists in my recommendation for $300, that would cost about an additional $389,000. And it was also discussed upon the GPD recommendation that we would look at a 3% increase below 7 years and 7% above 7 years without longevity. That would cost approximately $356,000. And The GPD could delay corporal promotions until, I believe, January, which would save an additional $91,000. Goldsboro Fire Department is looking for a total of a 9% increase. So if you've got 3% COLA and 1% merit, we would request an additional 5% on top of that, which is about $198,000. And that could be offset by inspection fees of about $60,000 and some delays in hiring for about another $100,000. So the pay and benefits for this course of action would be an additional $691,000, roughly. When I met with staff this past week, understanding our fund balance concerns and other budget concerns, the staff recommendation, department heads, was to do a 5% cost of living increase. Pay the employees up front now, and to not do the merit or bonus, which would save us $326,000. And then add the additional Goldsboro Police Department, Goldsboro Fire Department costs, totaling roughly $430,000. So that is a significant increase, of course, on top of the option one. But when you take a look at what inflation has done recently and some of the benchmarks that are out there, you know, we're trying to keep up with others in our peer group in order to retain employees. Are there any questions on that slide that I can answer? Okay. And again, we can talk about these things tomorrow in greater detail. I just wanted to get them out to you here this evening to think about. So how do we pay for this? We have, in addition to the $500,000 for the road paving, we have some planning department offsets. $69,000 in downtown sidewalk service will not be due until the next FY24. And there's a $10,000 lease for the sign on Highway 111 with a private property owner that it's been recommended we could not extend that lease and get rid of that sign as you come into Goldsboro on Highway 111. Public Works was looking at some maintaining and opening a position vacancy and some lapsed salaries along with what I call level of effort cuts across many of the line items in order to gain $62,000. One of the next biggest ones is Parks and Rec. Because we're going to fund the golf course automatic water system at the end of FY22, what we budgeted for $29,000 will not need to be budgeted there. And then there is a $10,000 permanent part-time salary that they can use as an offset, and an $8,000 part-time salaries would be what is offered up as cuts. The Finance Department has offered $19,000 FY22 audit contract services, GASB 87 consultant fees, reduced peak teller hours, and some supplies. So we may end up needing some of that contract service support, which if we take that funding from Finance Department, we'd have to go back to later on to reappropriate as necessary. Information Technology wanted to have a certification program. We set aside $15,000 for that. That would not be available this FY, as well as some software license fees to try to reduce those costs. In the city manager's office, I over budgeted for the assistant city manager's salary that we ended up determining, and then we would have to go in and cut some money out of the educational reimbursement. In other words, right now I don't have an employee that's looking to get education paid for, so that funding that was budgeted would not be necessary and able to be cut. In the Human Resource Department, they over budgeted for salaries as positions changed. The council, we would be able to take the $8,000 savings that was budgeted for the dais. In Paramount Theater, there's $4,800 worth of electrical savings and estimates to pay for their share of this when FY22 we're going to put in a new HVAC system. In downtown development, double booked contract services within the general fund and the MSD fund, so we can take that. And for contingency funding, you know, the 3-cent property tax increase, which is roughly $750,000, we would take some of that along with some money that was already saved in the contingency fund. And then travel and tourism would reduce some printing costs. The utility fund fees come out of savings from $200,000 associated with dredging the Neuse River, which we typically have to do, but we do not have to do this year. So that was budgeted and will come out of the budget and can pay for the costs associated with additional salary increases in the utility fund. And in the stormwater fund, That offset would be about $9,400, and the director mentioned that we could cut $4,400 from landfill charges, which is an 11% cut, and some tree service for $5,000, which is a 20% cut. So some of this is best estimates at this period of time. What should we do going forward, depending on what option you choose, option 3 or option 2? You know, you can try to do the paving and take the offsets from the department heads, or vice versa, or we could retain all these savings and put it in the contingency minus what we spend on personnel pay, because the price of gas and inflation has gone up significantly since we budgeted this. The price of gas has gone up 20%, and the price of diesel has gone up 10%. And if you use the estimates of fuel we thought we would use over the last 5 years, that's $250,000. So inflation hurts, and it might be best to be conservative at this point in time because of our fund balance concerns. So future budget concerns: how do we fund the additional FY23 pay raises next FY or the FYs after if we're using $3 million in ARPA funding in FY23, which will decrease to $1.4 million in FY24 and zero after that? Well, in FY24 that would be a $1.6 million offset, and you could use your 3-cent property tax increase you did 2 years ago and add another 3 cents. That would get you $1.5 million. We probably have some savings in loans coming due. I believe that's about $680,000. But when you add the cost of a vehicle loan, we probably save roughly $250,000 in loan payments next FY. All this may mean reduced funding for road work and department offsets in the future. Perhaps we'll get growth in the tax base and revenue. That remains to be determined. And then, of course, in FY25, when you cut another $1.4 million out of ARPA funding no longer be available, hopefully we have a tax base and revenue increase or reduce the size of government. These are some of the things that are facing us going forward. I didn't brief this at the last meeting, but it was brought to my attention. We probably should mention that the department's requested an additional 12 positions, which you see here, the majority of which would be in information technology. I did not approve any of these positions based on the shortfall of funding we have to pay our current employees. So tomorrow's council work session, I hope we can solve council's concerns on the budget and go forward with the draft budget to make it permanent and be approved in June 20th. But we need to finalize the employee pay. Nonprofit organizations, depending on what you want to do there, we could fund $160,000 to nonprofits and then determine at a later date how you want to split that up, or depending on the time you want to take, try to determine that tomorrow. Are there any other concerns that councils have that staff and I can work on between now and tomorrow to be better prepared? So that's my presentation on FY23 budget, sir.
Anyone have any comments or questions you want to bring up? I just want to reemphasize something that Mr. Salmon spoke to, is that the ARPA funding that we have and are going to be receiving plays a very important part of the funding for the this budget and next year in 23-24 budget. But we will not have that as of now in 25. So anything that we pass as a permanent increase, we need to also be aware of the fact that it's being supplemented by funds that we will not be replacing unless we decide to impose a property tax increase at some point in time. I'm not suggesting that, but just be aware of the fact that when we sit down tomorrow night and try to bring this to a close after we hear from the public this evening, that we're utilizing funding that's not going to be coming to us on an annual basis. So, any other comments anyone wants to make? Okay, If there's no other business on, another discussion on the budget, we'll take that up tomorrow evening. Next item is new business, and I'll take this one. And previously, the city has not had a seat at the Wayne County Development Alliance Board. I brought this up one time last year when the Alliance came to us about supporting an activity that they had planned. And then I went to a meeting earlier this year and advocated for us to have a seat on this board. It's imperative that we have a seat on this board because they are going out and worthwhilely recruiting businesses to come into Wayne County and the Goldsboro. But we need to be there in the outset so that we understand what the impact of what businesses may have on our city. So they heard and they responded. They changed their documents to allow us to have one seat on the board commencing this month. I was offered a position, but I felt that I should not take it. I felt that Councilman Broadway, with his banking experience and so forth, would be a candidate for that. The term of office is, they have 2 3-year terms someone can serve. So at this time, I'm going to offer a motion to appoint Councilman Broadway to the Wayne County Development Alliance Board. And if there's a second, please do so, and we can discuss it or make another nomination, whichever.
Mr. Mayor, I'll recuse myself. I just sit here.
Yes, sir. Mr. Broadway will recuse himself from the voting on this, but we don't have a second yet.
Are you able to do the motion?
I did.
You did, and I second that.
And motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor of appointing Councilmember Broadway to the Wayne County Development Alliance Board, please signify by raising your hand. Okay. You got the votes recorded?
Yes, sir.
We had a majority, correct?
They all voted yes.
I did.
Is excused. You didn't vote yes. Okay. Then I just,
Okay.
Mayor, just for her purposes,
Okay.
or is anybody
Those
opposed?
opposed, please raise your hand.
Thank you. I thought everybody raised their hand.
Thank you. Motion carries. Okay. We're about 18 minutes into this 2-hour session. That gives us an opportunity to get through a long list of consent agendas, or at least get started on them. So I want to ask at this time our finance director to come up and
You have the police are first. You want to start with item C, or are you changing? the
okay. I'm sorry. You have the first one. There's so many finance things here. You got.
I know, I had a hard time finding where I was gonna go when I saw what finance
Okay.
is, so anyway. Good
You got
evening,
about
Mayor,
2 or 3
council
there. I'm
members.
sorry.
We'll try to be brief. Item C, okay, make sure I'm in order. It's gonna be the Jams Out Juneteenth temporary street closing addendum. The temporary street closure for the Jams Out Juneteenth celebration scheduled for June 18th, 2022 was approved by the City Council on April 18th, 2022, and a special events parade street closure permit has been issued to the sponsor for the event. The sponsor, Curtis Media, has requested a change in the street closure and the time of the closure. As shown on the addendum, the sponsor is requesting the street closure to be from Chestnut Street to Pine Street, and a street closing time from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. The change in time is to accommodate for the setup of the vendors. As with all downtown events, affected city departments will be contacted, and the following concerns are to be addressed. All intersections remain open for the police department's traffic control. A 14-foot fire lane is to be maintained to provide access for fire and emergency vehicles. All activities, changes in plans, etc. will be coordinated with the police department, and the police and fire department should be involved in the logistical aspects of the event. By motion, grant the request changes to allow temporary closing of South Center Street from Chestnut Street to Pine Street from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. as indicated on the attached addendum. Any questions?
Questions? Go ahead, sir.
Okay. Item D is the Optimist Club temporary street closure. The Goldsboro Optimist Club looks forward to hosting a back-to-school celebration for city and county children. The event will be hosted at the Hub from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on South Center Street on August 6, 2022. The Optimist Club is requesting the closure of South Center Street to include both lanes of South Center Street from Pine Street to Chestnut Streets from 8 a.m. until 5 p.m. The Optimist Club has also requested that if the event is canceled due to inclement weather, rain, the date of the event will be changed from August 6, 2022 to August 13th, with the street closing remaining the same. As with all downtown events, affected city departments will be contacted and the following concerns are to be addressed. All intersections remain open for the police department's traffic control. 14-foot fire lane is to be maintained to provide access for fire and emergency vehicles. All activities, changes in plans, etc. will be coordinated with the police department, and the police department, fire department are to be involved in the logistical aspects of the event. The recommendation by motion grant the requested temporary closing of South Center Street from Spruce Street to Chestnut Street as stated in the discussion above.
Any
Questions?
questions? Okay.
Item E, Sprinkler Fun Days temporary street closure. The City of Goldsboro's Downtown Development Department is partnership with the Goldsboro Fire Department will host their 12th annual Sprinkler Fun Days event series, providing supervised summer splash fun for all ages. As always, Sprinkler Fun Days are free, family-friendly, and open to the public. The events will be hosted every Thursday from 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. on South Center Street from June 9th to August 18th. The Goldsboro Fire Department will set up and staff the event in the northbound lane of South Center Street between Spruce and Chestnut Street. The Downtown Development Department is requesting the closure of the northbound lanes of South Center Street from Spruce to Chestnut Street from 2:30 p.m. until 4 p.m. As with all downtown events, affected city departments will be contacted. The following concerns are to be addressed. All intersections remain open for the police department's traffic control. A 14-foot fire lane is to be maintained to provide access for fire and emergency vehicles. All activities, changes in plans, etc. will be coordinated with the police department. The police and fire department are to be involved in the logistical aspects of the event. Recommendation by motion, grant the requested temporary closing of the northbound lanes of South Center Street from Spruce to Chestnut Street as stated above. Any questions?
Questions? Okay, Chief?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, Ms. Wynn.
Got your tennis shoes on?
I don't know if I've got the endurance for 19 items. Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
So my first item tonight is about a resolution for the sale of radios to the Wayne County Sheriff's Office. We are required by...
Ms. Wynn,
Sir.
How about just giving us a little preface as what this generalized statement? These are sort of like ledger sheet cleanup stuff.
So it is. I've got several surplus
Journal
things.
entries is what I'm trying to think of.
Kind of, yes, sir. So we've got a lot of surplus items that council's going to have to approve. I've got some policies in here, and then quite a few budget amendments for projects. Yeah. Okay, so my first item has to do with the sale of surplus property. We're required by statute to have council approve the sale of surplus property. This is to another governmental agency. We have radios, portable radios that are no longer produced anymore, and the Wayne County Sheriff's Office still uses them. So they have offered for this list of equipment that you have in your packet, $2,640. They're discontinued, so it's in our best interest to approve this. So tonight we've got a resolution to authorize the sale of the surplus property to the Wayne County Sheriff's Office. Okay.
Any questions? Okay.
Okay. All right, my next item, again, it's surplus property, but this has to do with the donation of personal property to a 501c3 nonprofit, Global Gear Initiative, and it's pursuant to NCGS 160A280. We have firefighting equipment that is no longer needed by the city. It cannot pass the NFPA standards, and so there's really very little monetary value we could get if we put it on the Gov Deals to be sold. However, there is an entity called Global Gear Initiative that takes this equipment and they give it to less fortunate countries. I think I listed down there Guatemala, Mexico, Colombia, Peru, and so forth, Ukraine, Iraq, and where these entities are not, or these countries are not subject to the NFPA standards. So by allowing the council to surplus the equipment and allow us to give it to this 501c3, it can help other countries that need this type of equipment where they may have none. So we have an attached resolution that would authorize the donation of this equipment. And again, statute requires the council to approve such a donation to a 501c3.
Any questions? Okay.
Okay. My next item, this is about property surplus land. I have an accept or reject initial bid and authorize finance to advertise for upset bid for West Pine Street to Johnny Cox, DBA Cox Real Estate. The offerer has offered $2,700. The bid deposit was $150 in the form of a personal check. The tax value is $5,270. The offer is at least 50% of the tax value of the property, and we have received the bid deposit. The only other caveat to this is Mr. Octavius Murphy, who handles all of our surplus land property. He requested that I make council aware that this is in the 100-year floodplain. And just at this time, I'm just asking for the council to vote and say whether they will accept or reject. If you accept it, I have a resolution in your packet for the 7 o'clock meeting. So.
Any questions? Everybody willing to accept that?
Okay. All right. My next one is another surplus piece of land. Same thing, accept or reject initial bid and authorize finance to advertise for upset bids on 235 Wayne Avenue from Calm Properties and Investments, LLC. They have offered $2,660 with a bid deposit of $133, and we have received that in the form of a personal check. The offer is at least 50% of the tax value of the property, and I also have checked with the NC Secretary of State, and they are current and active at this point in time. So I would just need an accept or reject at this point for 235 Wayne.
One willing to accept? Okay.
My next item is resolution for disposition and destruction of city-owned ballistic vest. The City of Goldsboro participates in the U.S. Department of Justice Patrick Leahy Bulletproof Vest Program, and those vests are replaced every 5 years. We have several vests right now that have reached the end of their life, which also means they've reached the end of their warranty. Fiber Brokers International provides for the secure destruction of these vests. They're located out of Brent, Alabama. They've been in business for 15 years. They're not going to charge us anything. We just have to pay for the shipping. And again, by statute, council has to declare it surplus and then allow us to give this property over and say it's worth no value in order for them to dispose of it. And they do it so that it keeps these vests out of the hands of those that might use the vest against law enforcement. So we have a resolution to authorize disposition and transfer, and we will receive chain of custody and a destruction certificate, so we'll know that the vests have been destroyed and recycled.
Any questions? Okay.
Okay, so this is a big operating budget amendment. It's my next item, and I'm going to try to run through this as best as I can. So I tried to group it in large categories. The first item is for the employee Christmas bonus. We had some of the departments that were not able to cover all of their Christmas bonus out of their existing budget with lapsed monies. The total for those departments is $99,000. And these are coming from that needed the assistance: HR, community relations, inspections, garage, buildings and grounds, planning, solid waste, engineering, fire, police, parks and rec, and golf in the general fund. This is going to be funded with a reduction of the contingency line item. Also, as you are aware, we've had a lot of terminations, resignations in this year due to the labor market. So we've had a lot of departments that could not fund their vacation payouts. So the budget amendment that I'm proposing is for $71,000, and it's recommended for the city manager, HR, inspections, downtown development, planning, solid waste, engineering, police, parks and rec, and golf. And this again will be funded with a reduction in the contingency line item. In the golf division, we need to appropriate additional expenditures for alcohol for resale, and this is going to be funded with an increase in alcohol revenue of $8,000. The workers' compensation settlement, and I apologize, I have a mistake in here. I had I thought it was in the streets division, but there was a confusion because it was the same last name. This actually, it needs to be changed, and it's going to not be streets, it's going to be solid waste. The payout was $75,000, and this has occurred since I did the last amendment on April the 18th. And obviously, it can't be paid out of POW bill. It's going to have to come out of contingency. So I just want to let the council know that that amendment that will be presented for signature will reflect that. It's going to be solid waste and not streets. Okay. The Paramount Theater has had some ongoing critical roof repair issues. The director, Mr. Adam Twist, has been working to resolve the issues with the contractor and subcontractor. An agreement was met, and the roof repairs will cost $22,500. But Mr. Twist was able to get the Small Business Administration Shuttered Venues Grant in the amount of about $331,000. So the repair to the roof will be funded with that grant. The remainder of that money will go towards general fund contingency. In Parks and Recreation, the Kiwanis train surplus proceeds, council approved the installation of the new train, accepted the donation at the last meeting, and at the meeting in August, I believe, council approved that the proceeds from the sale would go towards the Kiwanis Club. So this time we have to amend the budget to appropriate the expenditures of $28,900. We have received the funds from GovDeals because the train got picked up, and then that's when they released the funds, so we have the money in the bank. For loan appropriation in the general fund, we took an installment financing contract in July of 2021. We anticipated, or tried to anticipate it was going to be done in 21. It didn't get done until 22. So we're going to appropriate the balance of the proceeds of that $1.6 million loan, and it's going to contingency. In the general fund other, we had several other expenditures of items that just arose during the year that needed to be funded. In the city manager's office, the biggest item of note is for the budget preparation for the Isley Group. We're appropriating $55,000. IT had the HVAC maintenance. The contract went up by $4,300. Buildings and grounds, their internal garage charges, they had a lot of repairs. That went up $5,500. Planning had their insurance deductible claims. For the Adkins claim was $8,901, and bearing in mind we have a $10,000 deductible, so they did not expect that this year. Parks and Rec needs to repair their alarm system at Herman Park Center. That's a critical need, so that's going to be $3,300 that they'll be trying to get that done here shortly. And Parks and Rec also had obviously more fuel costs. They were over about $6,500. And then golf, as the manager referenced, the irrigation computer system is $32,000. And by doing it now, I think there's a significant price increase if we get past July 1. So they wanted to go ahead and do that now. All of these items will be funded out of the contingency line item. In the procurement card, later in the agenda, I'll be presenting a procurement card policy for council to adopt. And part of this has to do with the fact that the LGC had additional rules and regulations that they put out in March of 2018. And we're actually supposed to appropriate every time we make a P card expenditure. So you can imagine I'm not at every transaction that somebody's making with a P card. So essentially what we have to do, this mechanism, is we have to appropriate expenditures, but the revenue is an offset. Because basically when we appropriate for the estimated P card expenditures, it is offset because it's going to be charged to a specific department when they process at the end of the month. So that appropriation is going to be $190,000, but it is offset by an internal charge out. In fund balance appropriated, of course, I always try to give this to you every time I do an operating amendment. The only thing that the city has appropriated in general fund balance is the purchase order rollovers we did in August. That was $156,000, and that remains the number today. The next item is the contingency. We typically don't have contingency, but I'm presenting this to you so you know that we started out with $758,000, which was the 3% property tax increase, which was supposed to help increase our fund balance to get us back to that 15%. Well, I've listed out in my memo the different payouts, the bonus, the VPO, the other expenditures and so forth, but also the pluses, the SBA grant, the balance of the loan proceeds. So that actually adds to the contingency 268. So the total current with the proposed is a little over $1 million to add back to general fund balance. Moving on to stormwater loan appropriation, this comes from that $1.6 million loan. It's going to replenish fund balance, so we're adding about $267,000 to the contingency line item into the stormwater fund balance. In utility fund other, we've had just a few things. Bonus vacation payout, the total for the three departments is a little over $12,000. And so when we look at that, the net difference, we've had other revenues that we had not anticipated. So we had the WEIR reimbursement of $166,000, another $457,000 out of miscellaneous, and all of these. And then we also had the final payment of $290,000, which the general fund is paying back the utility fund for the Dale settlement. And so all of that adds up to about $914,000. So all of that is going to go back into the utility fund contingency, which builds that fund balance. I provided a summary for you at the bottom of each of those funds: general fund, stormwater, and utility fund. The total budget amendment for all three funds is about $1.8 million. So if you have any questions.
Okay, back to
Okay.
item L.
Okay, so my next item is an adoption of a resolution to establish a procurement card policy and resolution authorizing the city to engage in electronic payments. This goes to the conversation we just had, where we've utilized a procurement card system probably since the early 2000s. We couldn't actually find out when it actually started, but that's what we're kind of guessing. And the city has always followed a written procedure. It just was never adopted by council. So we call it a policy. And so, I guess the way that I kind of been taught is that policy should be adopted by council. So we've presented this policy. I have modified it, tried to make it stricter. And so we have more accountability from the employee and from the department head. That's very important. And, I think with our conversations that we've had with our auditors, with the Office of State Auditor, those things about accountability are very important. So we've provided this policy for you all to review and hopefully approve. And this will follow that legislation that happened in 2015 that the LGC made their statement in their memo 2018-05, which told us how we could go about engaging in electronic transactions.
So you've got two resolutions here. One that authorizes the engagement of electronic payments, and then you've got one adopting the procurement of the card policy.
Yes, sir, that is correct. Okay. Any questions?
Any questions? Okay.
Okay. All right, make sure I got it. Okay, my next item is establishing and adopting a mandatory uniform guidance policy for the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, the conflict of interest policy. We've presented to the council in various meetings 7 policies that were required as part of the terms and conditions of the grant acceptance for the ARPA policy, and will allow us to comply with that word we keep saying, uniform guidance. So even though we are using the funds to replace or to take care of salaries and benefits, there theoretically should not be a conflict of interest, but because it's part of the base terms and conditions, we have to adopt a conflict of interest policy. So I've attached that resolution. It's fairly lengthy, but if you have any questions about it, I'll do my best to answer. Okay.
Any questions?
Okay.
Continue.
Okay, my next item is amending a grant project fund ordinance for the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, or CARES Act Special Revenue Fund. This is the grant that we received as a subrecipient from Wayne County in the amount of $966,000. We have turned in all the final reports. We're trying to wind this project up. Now, this budget amendment reflects the changes that the council was made aware of at various council meetings, like the IT fiber project that was reallocated to payroll expenses, the reallocation of the ineligible expenditures for the 3-in-1 Family Center, and then we had a couple of minor adjustments that we had to make. I gave you in my memo the original and then the final adopted. The final adopted reflects the actual dollars that were allocated to that. We have submitted the final reports, and the closeout has been submitted to Wayne County and NC Pro, and we're still awaiting final comment. I know they've downloaded, I know they've been looking. I don't believe the manager's office has received anything. I know I have not. So what we're also asking in the same breath of this to basically close out this project is also to close it out. That if we get no further comments where there's anything that's deemed ineligible, then we're going to say the project's done and it goes away. If, however, they come back and deem anything that's ineligible, we may have to come back to council because there may have to be an additional appropriation that has to be made. But otherwise, we feel like this is good and we're finally done with it. Okay. I have several small special revenue fund ordinance, and this is just to clean up for like donations and fundraisers and things. My next one has to do with the Community Relations Special Ordinance Fund. We have two small adjustments for $130.41 to clean up their budgeted revenues and expenditures. So if you have any questions about that, I'll move on. Okay. My next one is amending Special Revenue Fund Ordinance, Police Other Restricted Funds. The police department has actually received about $10,326 in additional donations, fundraising, surplus sales, and interest income. And so the council has to appropriate these so that they can spend them. The actual expenditures go to the actual specific project line item related to that revenue. And like I said, it's $10,326 if you have any questions. Okay. All right. My next one is to amend a grant project ordinance, the Coronavirus Aid Relief and Economic Security CARES Act miscellaneous grants. We have this fund because it took care of two sub-recipient grants that we received for CARES. Travel and Tourism received one of those grants in two tranches, if you will, for advertising. It was for a marketing campaign of about $25,000. And then Parks and Rec received through the North Carolina Alliance of YMCAs, they received a $94,000 grant. They were only able to spend about $19,000 of that. So at this time, what we're asking council to do is to amend the project budget so we can de-obligate, I think it's around $74,000, $75,000 of those funds because we're past the time period. We cannot spend them. And so the total miscellaneous grants that we got from that was about $45,000. All the expenditures have been made. All the revenues have come back in. And at this time, we're actually going to be closing this fund as well because we're done with it.
Okay.
My next one is amending a grant project ordinance for the Golden Leaf Hurricane Matthew Infrastructure Recovery Project. This project was the sewer infrastructure project for the Glenwood Subdivision storm drainage improvements funded by the Golden Leaf Foundation. The project has been completed at a total cost of $598,000. The project manager has submitted all the closeout reports and all the funds have been received. We recommend to de-obligate by budget amendment $362,000 and close this capital project fund, and we've gotten all our money back too. So, okay.
Just a question.
Mhm.
Do we have any Golden Leaf applications in? Do you,
I think
that
that's a
you're aware of?
manager question, maybe.
I'll have to check on that, sir.
Okay. I saw, I was talking to a couple of mayors last week, and they were talking about their grants that they've applied for, so. Go ahead, Ms. Wynn.
All right. My next item is amending a grant project ordinance for the Plate Settlers Project Water Treatment Plant Expansion. The city authorized the application in 2017 with Diener. We actually received it was a loan of $1.7 million at an interest rate of 1.82% for 20 years. And actually the project is now completed. And the capacity increase from the 12 to the 14 million gallons per day has been going on and it's working. So at this time, we're trying to close the project out. We had a total cost of $1.5 million. All expenditures have been made. All the reimbursements have been received. And at this time, we recommend de-obligating the last $594,000 so that we can close the capital project fund.
Any
Okay.
questions?
All right, my next one is amending a grant project ordinance, the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. And at this time, you know, we've brought several amendments, or I've brought several amendments to this project fund to the council. And based on the recommendations of School of Government, they recommend that we allocate the government services out. So the table that I provided you in the agenda memo shows by functional category. So like general government is like city manager, finance, human resources, IT. So we grouped what we thought would spend out the $8.8 million, and we've grouped them out like transportation, public safety, environmental protection, cultural, recreational, utility fund, and occupancy tax fund. So this amendment basically cleans up that $8.8 million. Okay, good. Okay, my next one is amending a special revenue fund ordinance, the federal and state drug forfeiture special revenue fund. Council established this in February of 2020. We've got some technical corrections that we need to make. The original funds actually came through the general fund, and based on an audit recommendation, we just have to change the revenue source from federal and state revenue to basically a transfer in, and then I've got some interest income that we needed to appropriate, about $131, so it's more of a technical correction on this one. Okay. And then my next item, amending a capital project fund ordinance for Parks and Rec capital project FY19 to 24. The city has received several donations through the Mayor's Committee for Persons with Disabilities for an ADA accessible playground equipment at the North End Park. I gave you a list of the actual donors, $5,550, and these items are going to be appropriated to an expenditure for ADA accessible equipment, North End Park. That's how the ordinance reads. And so it'll be there if we receive more donations, then we'll bring it back to council to appropriate the revenue and the expenditure.
Okay.
Okay, my next one is amending the Parks and Recreation Special Revenue Fund. We have several donations and sponsorships that are related to sports tourism that total $8,036.22, and a donation to the W.A. Foster Center from Delisa and Clifton Lawson, for $1,000, and we need to appropriate the revenue so we can appropriate the expenditure to the particular line item within the scope of the fund.
Any questions?
Okay, thankfully I'm on my last item.
Wonderful.
Okay, so this is a resolution to accept several cash donations to the city in support of city programs. So General Statute 160A11 allows a municipality to acquire and hold property and rights of property, whether it's real or personal, that may be devised, sold, or in any manner conveyed, dedicated, or otherwise acquired by the local unit. The city of Goldsboro does not have a formal adopted policy on accepting donations, grants, fundraising, things, bequeaths, and things like that. We don't have a formal policy on it. So technically, every time we get a donation, we're supposed to come to council and have the council approve it. So we've had several budget amendments that we've done tonight where we've had donations, and I'm asking you to approve the appropriations. This resolution actually gives us the power to accept them, so you're basically accepting. And also, the language is we're accepting the other donations that have come into the city. I gave you a list by project and the type of donation that it was. The whole total budgeted amount was about $560,000. Actual received to date was like $473,000. So staff is, or I am recommending that the council accept these cash donations, sponsorships, fundraising, and local grants previously received into the city central depository. I further recommend that council authorize the city manager or the finance director to accept future donations, scholarship, or sponsorships, fundraising, and local grants of cash only, okay? I'm not talking about real property. I'm not talking about personal property like somebody gives a car or any other personal. I'm talking specifically cash if two criteria are met. First criteria, it must be a legally authorized function of the city. If we are not, as a city, authorized by Constitution and by statute to do an activity, then we're not gonna take that, okay? Then the other criteria is if the program has already been established by the council with the requirement that these donations, we come back to the council at least quarterly and let you know. Because a lot of times I can't get to these special revenue funds and project funds till the end of the year. So I want you to know more frequently if we have received a donation. And I'll give you a real good example. It's like the Bryan Foundation. We get $50,000 a year. Well, theoretically, I should be bringing that to you so that you can approve it to say, okay, Catherine, it's all right for you to deposit it in the bank account. That's the technical, okay? So we're trying to correct that now. And so we're asking you in the resolution to pass that authority to us. You had already established the project fund for Parks and Recreation. So it was a legal, valid purpose, and that's what we're asking you now. Because if not, I have to comply with GS 15932, which is called the daily deposit rule, which means that if I've got more than $250 a day, I got to deposit it. I can't deposit it because I don't have the authority to do it. So you want me to take and tell the Bryan Foundation, take your check back. When I go to council in 2 weeks and get it approved, send it back to me. That just doesn't look good. So this is more of easing our administrative burden is what I'm asking you to do. So this is only for cash items, and it's only if it has been approved by council, the project or the program is approved, and basically it's a legally authorized function of the city. So.
I have a question
Yes.
here. The council has not been notified of previous donations or how much the donations were.
Mm-hmm.
Am I correct?
You have been in the budget amendment process, so what I would do is I would present the budget amendment and say we've got several donations. Some might be $25, some might be $50. And so, again, since there's no policy on this, it's never been done right, exactly, theoretically and technically. The council has ratified those to me in a certain action because they approved the budget amendment. So you approve the appropriation because it was called a donation, a sponsorship, or fundraising. So, I mean, to me, I'm not an attorney. You have to ask Ron that. And basically, we're trying to make it right now and do it the right way. And so what I'm saying is, to your point, is now I'm trying to say, give us the authority, because if not, when these folks come and say, here's the $1,000 for Parks and Rec, I got to turn them away. If you don't approve it, I have to turn them away and say, I'll make a note of it, I'll put it on the agenda for council to accept it, and then once they approve it, I'll call you back, and then you can come back and bring me the check. And I mean, if the council wants me to do that, that's okay.
Is there a caveat where we as the council will know, let's say, the $50,000, that we will know that it's $50,000, that we will know the cash amount?
You already did know it because we appropriated it in the original project budget ordinance, and it would have been stated that this is the source of the money because their grant, I can't remember the amount, it was like $350,000, and it was coming from the Bryan Foundation.
Okay, we as a council already knew the cash donations that we've already received.
Yes, ma'am.
We already knew how much they were. They have already been brought to the council.
They were already brought and approved by the council. It's
All
just,
right.
I didn't do it with a formal resolution. It was through the budget ordinance.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And the resolution
In the future, you're
to,
going to do a quarterly update. You mentioned.
I'm gonna do a memo or something in your monthly report. to give you
Okay,
that
I
information.
think that would be better, because sometimes, we don't always catch, I'm speaking to me.
Yes.
I don't always catch that. Sometimes I do, because I know, it's in the details, but sometimes I don't. So I think that would be a good idea.
Yes, ma'am. That would be my plan, is put it in the monthly reports,
Okay.
like on a quarterly basis. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
you have a resolution to that effect.
It's built into the resolution I presented tonight.
Any other comment?
Okay,
Well,
I'm done.
You've given us 15
Good job.
plus
Thank you,
items
Kathy.
here, which speaks to you all in the finance department trying to correct and rectify some of these policies that have been taking place or activities have been taking place without much of a policy per se.
That's right.
And this should correct that.
It helps. We've
Yeah.
got a little ways to go, but this is a big step for us. Thank y'all. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you,
Thank you, thank you. Okay, our next item, Y, has been referred to the items requiring individual action, but we've got a couple more that can take its place. Planning, Mr. Talbot.
Hey, good evening, councilmen and women. I wanted to introduce a new employee with City of Goldsboro's Planning Department. It's Mr. Austin Brinkley. Austin is a fellow East Carolina graduate, and he has prior work experience with Sampson County and Onslow County in their Planning and Development Department, and he is now serving as our Assistant Planning Director for the City of Goldsboro. We're glad to have Austin to help shed the load. He's been a great asset in his first 30 days with us here, and we look forward to him and his work and what he brings to the city in the coming months. Also, he's going to be helping us with our transportation needs as well. He's working closely with Jennifer and NCDOT, Miss Jennifer Collins. So, again, get used to seeing Mr. Brinkley in and around our department, and please drop by to see him and say hello when you get a chance. Austin, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Brinkley.
Thank you.
I met you the other day, and welcome aboard.
Yes, sir.
Welcome.
Nice to meet all of y'all.
Okay, we've
Real
got-
quickly, yes, sir. So we're going to discuss Z622 at our council
Let's
meeting.
do
Z7.
Z7.
C7.
Z7.
Yes. So Z7, Duke Energy Progress, again, they will be considering, the Planning Commission is making a recommendation to approve that rezoning from, from R20A to I2. And also Z822, Planning Commission is also making a recommendation to rezone property there from R16 to R12 conditional zoning for a residential subdivision consisting of 62 lots. At tonight's hearing, we'll end up going through that. I tell you, it's if you'd like, Mayor, I'll go through those
Yes,
slides
please,
real
yeah.
quick for you. Let's see. So this is the property again that Duke Progress is looking at having rezoned off of Thoroughfare Road. Currently it's zoned residential. It contains a electrical utility substation. Our comprehensive land use plan recommends industrial for the property, and hence that is the reason why they are rezoning the property, because it's inappropriately zoned as residential. So the next piece of property again is we're looking at rezoning. This Alpha 13 LLC is proposing the rezoning from R16 to R12 conditional zoning for the 62 lot subdivision. Currently is R16. They will be asking to rezone to R12 conditional zoning to limit again the property to 62 lot subdivision. There's a site plan showing the subdivision, a concept plan, not a site plan. Just to the left there is where Somerville subdivision is located off of West New Hope Road. And anyway, that's all we'll have for you tonight. Any questions?
Any other questions?
All right. Sounds good.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
You'll come back later on for Z6.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Mr. Manager?
Yes, sir. The City of Goldsboro owns a water tank located at 621 North Madison Avenue. The city has entered into an agreement with T-Mobile for installation of cellular and broadband antenna facilities on city water tanks. The original agreement was dated January 10, 2017, with an amendment dated January 28, 2022. The original agreement and amendment were approved at the Goldsboro City Council meeting on March 21st, 2022. This proposed amendment increases the ground space from 120 square feet to 160 square feet. In consideration for the increased ground space, the annual rent due under the agreement will increase $1,800 as of the effective date. This additional rent shall increase under the same terms and conditions as the regular rent payment. It is recommended that council approve the resolution amending the T-Mobile lease agreement on Madison Ave.
How many of our towers water towers have cell phone
I
antennas
believe
on?
they all do, but I'd have to check on that.
Any other questions? Okay, wow, we finished this up in an hour's time. We have no other business, so we'll, motion to adjourn. No, excuse me, no motion, just to, we'll adjourn
Just
to.
recess, not adjourn.
We'll recess till 7 o'clock. I'll get it out.
And Pate at intermission about all the great services you'll find